Okay.
I love the intro.
Which intro? We're doing an intro right now.
Live
This
to
is
air. Yeah.
live.
Clients. All right, ready?
No smartness needed. Okay. All right, we are streaming live, and you'll hear in the background we've got the sounds of real reporters on real trains going to real places in undisclosed locations. This is L2A for what is it? April the 17th. We're still in the 17th in this part of the world. It's probably the 18th in other places. So, hi, Alison.
Hi, Joni. Nice to talk to you tonight, and thank you for patching me in from the train.
I love it. It's great. It's like the train schedule dictates the length of the show. So I'm going to let you introduce the subject, and I'm going to nip over and have the headline on the screen. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, this morning when I got on the transit system here, I picked up the paper that they hand to people, and I saw a story that I had remembered from last summer, and I thought it was pretty interesting because it was a very vague sort of headline that said, bizarre brain injury or rare brain injury or something. And I had remembered that there was people from the embassy in Havana, Cuba, Americans and Canadians that had been affected by some sort of sonic noise or sonic attack of sorts. And there was just a lot of questions that I had, and obviously those questions still haven't been answered because this article is again very vague. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for us tonight to sort of carry on in our investigation series, but by using this as an example of when you have very little information, what kinds of questions can you ask to sort of set you in the right direction to try and find more information. So that's what we're going to do tonight is just look at something and just ask ourselves a bunch of questions. And I guess my first question came right out of the little tiny blurb that was on the newspaper clipping. And it said that yesterday on Monday, 2 days ago now, the Canadian government had changed their authority or their mandates with the diplomats in Havana, and that they would no longer be taking their families. So my first question is it safe for the diplomats to be going there? If it's not safe for the families, why is it not safe? If it's not safe for the family, is it safe for the diplomat? It just seemed really strange to me. They've obviously taken a position, but why have they taken that position? So that was the first thing that kind of came out to me. And I think, Joni, you had some completely different but equally valid questions as well.
I'll turn my mic up. My questions were really just to do with something that I'd already heard about this because it did actually make a couple of major publications. And I don't know who I was talking to last summer, but we were interested because I think people were wondering if it was EMFs, something that I've reported on before and been interested in.
So wait a minute. Can you just explain EMX just for people who might be new to that term? Give a brief explanation of.
Yep. Electromagnetic frequencies. So, they're basically what's being given off by your refrigerator and actually this phone, everything. It gives off a signal. And so even radio phones, like the old fashioned kind with the antennas, it's the frequencies that are out there electromagnetically. I mean, that's the simplest term. It's quite easy to think of that way. But, so rather than saying it's smart meters, I think a lot of people aren't aware that these frequencies are given off by pretty much any technology that has to communicate with itself, with other people, I'm sorry. So
Right.
walkie-talkies, any of that stuff.
Right, and all around us is sound. And here's an example, I think, for people who listen to music. Music is recorded at certain frequencies. And some frequencies are more pleasing to the human ear than others. And I, for relaxation, listen to music that's at 532 frequency. There's different frequencies. I don't know what they record heavy metal at, but when I listen to heavy metal, I get seriously agitated. And I'm not the only one that happens with. But there's something in the music that pumps you up, that makes you feel aggressive. And so I just wanted to use that as an example so that people can understand that frequencies and sounds can be really disruptive. If you hear, like, if you ever have tinnitus and you hear like something buzzing, it can be really annoying, a noise in the background. So thanks, that's the EMF.
You know, I've looked into that a little bit. I find it quite interesting to know that about the Schumann resonance. I don't know if people have heard about that. So frequencies can be really helpful. They can be really harmful. So they can be healing, or they can be really a pain in the butt, as in the case with these guys who are having brain injuries. So, it's interesting that the frequencies themselves are not intrinsically good or bad. It's whether they actually resonate with the body. That's why we call them resonances. And you're right, some music will actually be very healing and some is very disruptive depending on the resonance. I'm just going to put this up on the screen if anybody's interested in it. Let's see. We'll put this up here. You sound like you're panting.
Oh yeah, I'm going up a little bit of a hill. This is this is the part of my, I try and be environmental in my transportation. And Vancouver is a great city, Greater Vancouver area, which incorporates 24 municipalities. It's a big chunk of land, and you can pretty much get anywhere you want by public transportation. But I have a bit of a walk at the end of my journey.
Yeah.
So
But
that's
just
where I'm
in
going
case
now.
people were wondering, I'm not doing anything. We're
No,
not in the
no.
same room or anything.
I like to walk briskly. I'm walking briskly. Yeah.
Good for you. You're inspiring all of those that are just sitting around looking at their computer screen, like me. So on the screen,
But
you won't.
what
Sorry.
happened to these people in Havana? So let's get back to the screen. Yeah.
Just have to do one little thing because I've got this site. It's a site called earthbreathing.co.uk, and it's the first one that I came up with just to explain about the Schumann resonance, because I think people might want to take a look at that. And it's 7.8 is the resonance of the earth, like it's the heartbeat of the earth, and it happens to be the heartbeat of the human body too. So that's called the Schumann resonance, which was discovered scientifically and blah blah blah. So here's a little bit of that information if you want to take a look at it. It's really interesting. Okay, on to the embassy.
And if you wanted to, you can make somebody crazy by sending a disruptive frequency at them. And I know this has been used in many circumstances. I think, you've heard of them trying to get somebody to come out of their house by playing like loud music or putting in concussion grenades, things that will disrupt your hearing, disrupt your sense of, like, your hearing also controls your sense of equilibrium, your sense of balance. If you blow your hearing, you can be knocked off, lose your balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of different side effects that can happen from having sound disruption sent to you.
Right.
And so I'm just kind of wondering, because it seems that there's been a series of stories come out. I think the original reports were from August 2017.
Well,
or maybe sooner than that.
But the actual incidents of this happening started in November 16th. Now, what was going on in the U.S. in
that would have
November
been the election, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that have been the election between Hillary Clinton and
it was
Donald Trump in November 2016?
Well, he had been elected by the 8th, so anything after the 8th is going to have some sort of connection, I would say, with that little situation. And who has a lot of who has access in Cuba? I mean, it's really a Russian. It's an outcropping of Russia, right? So it's interesting.
Well, but there is also U.S. military bases right there as well, and Guantanamo Bay is right there too. It's close by, so you're in range of a lot of stuff. It could be any number of things going on. I don't understand. I guess for me the biggest question is, why did they change the policy that the diplomats from Canada cannot bring their families? That to me says that there's something wrong, but not wrong enough that they're stopping sending the diplomats. Like, they're not saying, oh, we're going to pull our diplomats from Havana. We're no longer going to have an embassy in Havana. What they're saying is they can't bring their families with them. And it's sort of like, really? Why? If there was, if there's enough of a reason to not bring the families, then what is that reason? That's my question.
Well, I think it's when you have people that are having brain injuries, and they were reporting it last summer. I think there's something going on there that you can't really cover up. This is the problem when you've got a lot of people who are going to hospitals and saying that they have these symptoms that match each other, and then they all say, well, there's this weird sound. This is what I heard at the time. That's what I heard. That's the sound I heard. But I know that feeling of like, is this me, or am I going crazy, or what's going on? So I was wondering at the time whether it was kind of an MK Ultra thing where they were just trying to get people to do certain things based on certain sounds. But that's total conjecture.
Right. There could be any number of reasons. I think the point what you and I are trying to show here with our audience is when you're doing an investigation, there's a lot of questions. And the more questions you ask, actually, the better it is. Because, we have like a little brainstorming question. We're like, well, what about this? What about this? And why did that guy do that? And that questioning actually helps to bring you to a place where you can objectively start asking questions that may have some meaning. And the questions also help to eliminate things that are not important. Mm-hmm. Like I asked the question earlier, you were mentioning that this was happening in the embassies. Were other people affected? Well, we couldn't find any proof or any reports of other people being affected. But that doesn't necessarily mean that other people weren't affected. It just means that there was no report of it. Mm-hmm. Right? So what's real? And so the questions help with the process of elimination, or they help to build information so that you're building your information to help connect your dots with.
Right.
And the more questions you have, the better chance you have of eliminating the unnecessary stuff and finding the stuff that's important. So that was what I wanted to try and convey to the audience tonight is in the investigation, the questioning is really important. Why are these people here? What happened? When did it start? And just going through. And sometimes you ask yourself crazy things that have nothing, you think, oh, this has nothing to do with it. But oddly enough, sometimes the very rare things that seem like they're not associated, somebody's daughter had a nosebleed. Mm-hmm. That could be a really vital piece of information. Mm-hmm. And I'm using a nosebleed as an example because pressure in the brain can facilitate it or can reveal itself in a number of ways, one being a nosebleed. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Well, a nosebleed or any kind of bleeding is indicative of a lack of balance somewhere in the body. It's telling you something.
Or internal bleeding.
Want to mention what Newsweek was saying at that time. This was back in the summer. And they were saying that this is kind of interesting too. On Wednesday night, 21 members of the staff at the U.S. Embassy in Cuba showed various signs of real medical problems when they were evaluated by doctors at the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Brain Injury and Repair, including issues with balance and hearing. And so the next paragraph is interesting. It says, almost all of the diplomats showed, quote, objective clinical manifestations, unquote, of a problem. 3 people have even needed hearing aids, and almost all said their symptoms, which included memory problems, dizziness, and light sensitivity, lasted for more than 3 months. So the interesting thing here is that it says that they're now taking them seriously. So there must have been a time when they weren't really taking the symptoms seriously, because this was by August, right? This was, just a sec. No, I'm sorry. This is actually the one that was printed that
in
came
February.
Out on the February 15th this year. But there's this stuff going on in the background. This isn't going away. And what I wanted to show people was CNN, even though I don't like to show CNN. They were forced to, well, who knows? Maybe this was one of those talking points that they were supposed to discuss. This was back in August 10th. And there were three reporters actually put onto this. So they must have considered it to be fairly important. That's another thing I look at. When you see that there are three of their staff members that are put onto a story,
Right.
that's weird.
Right. They consider it to be important enough that they have to assign more than one person to it.
Yeah. So this is, and it says the U.S. Embassy in Havana. So I have no evidence whatsoever that it went outside of the embassy, which is even more insidious because I used to think that this was something that was general to the population, but they can target people right down to the square meter. And I'm going to say that this is very similar technology as what, I'm just going out on a limb, but it's very similar to what is at the heart of the dustification of the buildings on 9/11. It's a very similar thing. Believe it or not, it's a sonic thing.
Right. And I'm wondering about the Canadians, because there was Canadians involved. So were the Canadians working in the U.S. Embassy? Were they collaborating with people in the U.S. Embassy? Or was the Canadian Embassy affected in the same way that the American Embassy was affected? Were there other embassies affected?
I can tell you that. It says the sophisticated device that operated outside the range of audible sound was deployed either inside or outside the residences of U.S. diplomats living in Havana, according to 3 U.S. officials.
Right. So they must have been also targeting Canadians as well, because the Canadians were affected also.
Well, okay, so I'm thinking that could have happened while they were doing work in the embassy, because presumably they're actually doing work with one another. So it could be while they were visiting the embassy.
Or maybe the Canadians were targeted along with Americans. It could be as well. I wonder if any other nationalities were included.
I don't see evidence of that. And if anybody's going to tell you or deflect, it's going to be CNN, isn't it? They're going to, because.
Well, I'm just saying that because new reports are coming out, obviously Canadians were affected because the Canadian government changed policy based on the fact that Canadians were affected. So I'm wondering if they're, yeah. So, but where were those Canadians when they were affected? Were they in their homes? Were they in their embassy? Or, so that's the question is where did this attacking take place? It sounds like the attacks took place for the Americans inside their homes. So were the Canadians also targeted the same way that the Americans were?
Yeah, I haven't seen any evidence of it, but I'm going back to the Star article, and it says that there were 10 Canadians in all, but that means there were 3 diplomats, and it's their family members
Right.
and children, but 10 in all. So what I saw was that there were 24 diplomats altogether that were affected, of which 21 were U.S. citizens.
Huh.
So it says the cause remains unknown, but could be human-made. You think?
Yeah.
Well, it's not like nature is going in there and targeting embassies, but they do say that it started in late 2016, and I saw November somewhere else. So that seems weird.
Yeah, that's about the same time the election was happening. A lot of interesting stuff was happening in November of 2016.
Yeah. So there is an inquiry going on in Canada, and that's kind of encouraging to know that they're actually looking at it. And I wonder what the other repercussions are. There's so many ways this story could go. It's a good story because you can sink your teeth into the smart meter issue as well, because this could be you and me. If they wanted to do targeting, they can use our phones. You're on a phone right now. I'm sitting with headphones on my head. So the idea that we can be targeted in this way, whether in Cuba or anywhere else, should be a little bit of an eye-opener in and of itself, that they're acknowledging it. Oh, and yet there's, it doesn't cause autism. Just want to mention. So,
as long as it doesn't cause autism.
That's the main thing.
I'm already deaf enough, and I've already got enough brain injury. I don't need any more. Thank you.
Well,
So,
I
well,
find
I
this
think
so
that,
interesting that they're actually
yeah,
acknowledging that based on what they found in, was it Pittsburgh? Anyway, yeah, I think it was the Pittsburgh hospital that did the diagnosis. Okay, so now how can they say that sound, like the EMFs don't make any difference in the lives of children, and yet they've got these people that have brain injuries? What's autism?
right. Well, for me, I can totally relate to this because I had biotoxin poisoning, which caused a brain injury for me. And I heard a lot of disturbance. I had ringing in my ear. I had problems with my balance, with my equilibrium. From the disruption in the neurology in my brain, I had problems with my vision. So I can completely understand this. There's times when I felt like I was drunk. I couldn't walk straight. I was completely stone cold sober, but I was walking like a drunk person because my balance was completely compromised. So I had those same kind of symptoms, but it was from a biotoxin poisoning. It sounds like it was affecting in very much the same way as the sonic disruption, but that's because it affects your neurology. In your neurology, your brain, your center of control, and especially your hearing. Your hearing is responsible for your center of balance, and if your hearing is affected, you basically you have trouble standing up. You bump into things. Some people suffer from vertigo. There's a variety of things. So it makes sense to me. It totally makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is who are all the people involved? Where did the sound originate from? Is it man-made? And why is it selectively affecting people? Because it doesn't seem like it's affecting the whole city of Havana, but it's affecting specific people.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all the questions. And so that was basically the purpose of having this discussion tonight, was to sort of take the audience on that journey of, when you're doing an investigation, there's a lot of questions that you come up with that help you to form the direction that you take your investigation into. So I challenge people now to dig in. And, if this story is something that's interesting to you, we've given you sort of like a little bit of an opener. There's not very much information, but I invite people, to see if we can find some more, and fill in some of the blanks, and maybe we can find out exactly what did happen in Havana. Is it still happening? And are our diplomats from Canada and the United States safe to go back there? Should we be pulling them out permanently? Is this something that we need to, should we be concerned for the future of the diplomats there? Why can't they take their families? Those are all questions that I have.
Well, and what are
So,
the implications generally if this is the kind of targeted attack that people can actually perpetrate, or who knows who's doing it? But
right,
if this can be done, we see evidence that it can be done. So therefore, we need to really be aware that it can happen anytime, anywhere. And so I think that it's important that we dig into this story a little bit. You might want to take a look at. I'm going to be organizing some of my interviews done in the past. I've done a lot of radio interviews that have not made it onto YouTube, but Dr. Ole Johansson from the Karolinska Institute, he's been there for 40 years and talks about the suppressed technology, studies of technologies
right,
like cell phones. And, he talks about that. He's still working there, and he hasn't been targeted, but because he was willing to go along with that, basically. But what he said is that he's leaving the information for the next generations. It's quite cool. But he's gotten involved in the smart meter discussion. So I'm just seeing that correlation there. And if you need information, he's a wealth. It's quite amazing. Who else did I talk to? And also Andreas Kalker is really good. He talks about sodium chloride, but he's also discussing this idea that our brains are very closely related with what we take into our bodies, whether it's electromagnetic or whether it's food or whatever. And if we have
right.
parasites and pathogens in our body, then it will actually affect our brain. So that has another correlate. So I'm seeing this going off in a number of different directions. Might I say that you might want to take a look at the Daily Beast, not one of my favorite pieces of information, but it's kind of it's a good place to go if you want to find various points of view. And actually, they have a pretty good story here. And it's, again, written by a couple of people, Ashley and Tanya. And it's what I like about this is that it goes a little bit deeper in. It was on September 29th of 2017. But it says, the group, along with 3 Canadians, were all suffering from an odd combination of symptoms: hearing loss, dizziness, headaches, fatigue. And this was Secretary of State Rex Tillerson ticked off. He reeled off, I guess that's another way of saying it. They might have wanted to say, but he ticked it off in an official statement. Now look at this. When I go to that link, when we go to Rex Tillerson's statement, which is official, the page you're looking for may have been moved or renamed. He's over here, so you'd have to do a little bit of digging, but it's not just that easy to find that particular piece of evidence.
It's interesting to me that it's interesting to me that it has moved. That's indicative of either they're trying to hide something or they're trying to bury the story. But I think I've got to go because I got to go on to my next project here. But I think we've raised a lot of questions, and I think this is a great exercise for people to, if they're interested, to pick up where we've left off and dig a little deeper. Again, this is just a great exercise to show people the questioning process, how we look at a simple story, something small. And I think, looking at the stories that aren't getting the main coverage that you see just bombarding everything else. This is a story that basically kind of came out and nobody really heard much of it. So when I saw it this morning, it just piqued my interest again. Oh, whatever happened to that story? It was something that kind of came out and then it was blown over again. Like the Rex Tillerson page, it's been moved. Where did it get moved to and why?
I went over there, and so the folks on the screen. One thing that's a bit of a challenge for us right now is that Alison's on the phone. So what I like about this process, though, is we kind of do it in between jobs or in between life experiences, whatever we're doing. We're able to just check in, and so she's on a phone. She can't take a look at what I'm seeing or what you guys are seeing. But I did go over and I clicked on his particular link, and it's very empty. It says former Secretary of State Rex Wayne Tillerson, 2017 to 2018, and then it's pretty much blank. It says that he served as the 69th Secretary of State, and that's it, one line. So there's no stories about sonic booms, no statements.
Right.
No, nothing.
Right. They took it away. Yeah, exactly. So that piques my interest even more. So, all right. Well,
okay,
thanks for the process. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to share that. Yeah. And we'll look forward to digging into something tomorrow.
Okay. Well, thanks to the audience members, and share this around and get involved, whatever level. If this is something that's interesting to you, then follow some of those little rabbit trails and enjoy yourself. Okay, we're going to sign off now. See you later.